Not so much as a law but rather a policy review, Gonski is funding that is designed to ensure that every Australian child, no matter what their background, can get a high quality education. This funding began in 2014 after the independent Gonski Review warned too many children were missing out on the education they needed due to a lack of resources. The review, headed by respected businessman David Gonski, said Australia was underinvesting in education and not delivering funds to where it was needed most. Under the Gonski Plan, all schools are funded according to the individual needs of their students and what is required to educate them to a high level. Schools can use the additional resources to better meet the individual needs of students. The ways they can use the funding include reducing class sizes, employing additional specialist teachers in areas such as literacy and numeracy, providing greater assistance and support for students with disabilities or behavioural problems, and building the skills and knowledge of teachers. The idea is to bring all schools up to an agreed minimum resource standard. It also means that all schools will have the tools they need to do a good job for their students, and Australian schools that are already above the resource standard will still receive the base funding that will go to every school in Australia and will not be penalised, as well as schools with less will get slightly more. To achieve this, federal and state governments need to contribute funding, with 65% of funding from the federal government and 35% of funding from each of the states, and the plan is that it will take 6 years, but this is now in turmoil. It also aims to give extra funds to schools with students who have special needs, as it is recognised that these students are more expensive to teach. Gonski funding has shown to open up new programs in schools and allow for enrichment for students, resulting in improved literacy rates and improved resources through better teaching, and has helped provide individual support for students with disabilities and learning difficulties with measured improvements in their learning. Gonski levels the playing field among public and private schools and gives students and teachers access to funds so that their school can reach a minimum standard of resources, which can only be a good thing. Unfortunately, the Gonski reforms have almost been completely scrapped by the conservative right-wing government, formerly under Tony Abbott and now Malcolm Turnbull. This has caused some serious problems between the states that already signed up to Gonski funding under the previous Labor government of Gillard and Rudd. This scrapping has opened up a number of curious legal claims that have been made by both the states and the federal government. The current Federal Education Minister suggests that the Commonwealth is not bound by agreements negotiated with Victoria and Tasmania because those states had failed to sign a final agreement with the Commonwealth. This is despite the fact that the then Tasmanian Premier insists that the final deal was reached verbally with the then Prime Minister Kevin Rudd prior to the election. In New South Wales, the Education Minister maintains that his state had signed a binding agreement and therefore that it must be honoured by the Commonwealth. Sadly, the reforms and fundings have been stalled, with the current federal government still yet to come up with any viable options or policies to rival the Gonski Review, instead opting to wind back the clock to the older policies of the Howard era back in the 90s.
Created using Powtoon.